Marcus Chun had always believed that being a cargo hauler was the safest job in the galaxy. Flying from station to station, delivering supplies to mining operations and research facilities scattered across the Outer Rim, he rarely encountered anything more dangerous than a faulty navigation computer or an overly aggressive customs official. That belief shattered the moment his proximity alarms screamed to life while passing through the Kepler 442 system. The distress beacon was faint, almost lost in the cosmic background radiation that plagued this remote sector. Marcus frowned at his console, fingers dancing across holographic controls as he tried to isolate the signal. His ship, the Wandering Star, was built for hauling, not rescue operations. The cramped bridge barely had room for his pilot's chair and the essential control systems. Behind him, the cargo hold contained 40 tons of medical supplies destined for the colony on Kepler 442b. The signal clarified as he adjusted the filters. Standard galactic distress code, but with an underlying harmonic that seemed off somehow. Marcus had been flying these routes for 8 years, and he'd learned to trust his instincts. Something about this signal felt different. Desperate. He plotted an intercept course, knowing it would delay his delivery by at least 6 hours. The colony wouldn't be happy, but maritime law was clear across all inhabited systems. No sentient being ignored a distress call, regardless of species or political affiliation. It was one of the few universal constants that had emerged from humanity's chaotic expansion into the stars. The source of the signal appeared on his screens 30 minutes later. A small craft, barely larger than an escape pod, drifted powerless against the star field. Its design was unlike anything in Marcus's recognition database. Sleek curves replaced the angular efficiency of human engineering, and what appeared to be organic growth patterns decorated the hull. No obvious weapon systems, though that meant little in an age where a mining laser could vaporize a battleship's armor. Marcus maneuvered the Wandering Star alongside the craft and activated his external cameras. Through the semi-transparent canopy, he could see a figure slumped over what might have been controls. The being was roughly humanoid, but clearly alien. Pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer even in the harsh light of space, and hair that moved as if underwater despite the vacuum around them. His universal translator crackled to life as he opened a communication channel. Unknown vessel. This is Marcus Chun of the cargo ship Wandering Star. I'm receiving your distress signal. Do you require assistance? Static answered him for several heartbeats before a weak voice emerged from speakers. The words came in a melodic language that sounded like singing, which his translator rendered into accented standard. Please, power failing life support. The voice was definitely feminine, with a musical quality that made Marcus think of wind chimes. Cannot repair systems. Marcus checked his atmospheric readings. The alien craft's life support was indeed failing, showing dangerous levels of carbon dioxide and falling oxygen. Whatever species she was, she breathed something close enough to human normal atmosphere that his ship's environment would support her. I'm going to dock with your vessel and bring you aboard, Marcus transmitted. Prepare for extraction. The docking procedure took 20 minutes of careful maneuvering. The alien craft had no standard docking collar, forcing Marcus to use his ship's emergency airlock and cutting tools to create an entry point. Throughout the process, he could hear the alien woman's increasingly labored breathing over the communication channel. When the cutting torch finally breached the hull, Marcus found himself face to face with the most beautiful being he'd ever encountered. Her skin wasn't just blue, but seemed to contain depths of color that shifted from azure to deep indigo, depending on the light. Her eyes were large and completely silver, reflecting his helmet lights like mirrors. Despite her obvious distress, she moved with a fluid grace that suggested she was more comfortable in zero gravity than most humans. "Thank you," she whispered as Marcus helped her through the improvised airlock. Her voice carried that same musical quality even through his helmet speakers. "I'm Zara of the Kethmar. My vessel, it was damaged in an attack." Marcus secured the airlock and led her toward the ship's small medical bay. "Attack? By who?" Zara's silver eyes flickered with something that might have been fear. Pirates. They hunt my people through this region. We are valuable to them. The medical bay was little more than an automated diagnostic unit and a few basic treatment pods. Marcus helped Zara onto the examination table and activated the scanners. The results made him frown. Her physiology was indeed compatible with human environment, but there were anomalies. Her bone density was significantly higher than human normal, and her muscle mass suggested she was far stronger than her delicate appearance indicated. The scanner shows you're in good health, just exhausted, Marcus reported. Your ship's life support failed just in time. Another hour and he let the implication hang. Zara's expression was difficult to read, but Marcus thought he detected relief mixed with something else. Gratitude, perhaps, or calculation. You saved my life, Marcus Chun. The Kethmar do not forget such debts. Over the next several hours, as Marcus continued toward his destination, Zara proved to be fascinating company. She told him about her people, a nomadic species that traveled between star systems in small family groups. They were traders and explorers, she said, but had been driven from their traditional routes by increasingly aggressive pirate activity. My people have wandered the stars for thousands of your years, Zara explained as they shared a meal in the ship's tiny galley. She had accepted human food readily, though she ate very little. We seek knowledge, beauty, experiences that expand the soul. But these pirates, they see only profit in our capture. Marcus found himself drawn to her stories of distant worlds and alien civilizations. Zara described crystalline cities that sang in the wind, gas giants where jellyfish-like creatures the size of continents drifted through ammonia clouds, and artificial worlds built inside hollow asteroids by species long extinct. You've seen more of the galaxy than most humans dream of, Marcus said with obvious envy. My route takes me to the same dozen systems over and over. Mining colonies, research stations, cargo depots. Not exactly exotic. Zara's silver eyes seemed to study him intently. There is beauty in stability, in purpose. My people's wandering has brought us wisdom, but also vulnerability. We have no permanent home, no place to retreat when threatened. As they talked, Marcus noticed small details that didn't quite fit her story. Despite claiming to be a trader and explorer, Zara showed no curiosity about his cargo or destination. When he offered to show her the ship's navigation charts, she declined politely but firmly. Most puzzling of all, she never asked about contacting her people or arranging for rescue. The wandering star dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system 18 hours later. The main colony world hung before them like a blue-green jewel, its single city visible as a cluster of lights on the night side. 3 orbital stations formed a triangle around the planet, processing centers for the rare Earth elements that made this system valuable to human expansion. Beautiful, Zara murmured, studying the displays. Your species builds with such ambition. Marcus began the approach sequence to Orbital Station Alpha, where he was scheduled to deliver the medical supplies. Standard procedure required him to report his passenger to station security, but something made him hesitate. Zara had mentioned that pirates were hunting her people. What if some of those pirates had corrupted officials in the colonial administration? Zara, he said carefully, do you have identification documents? The station will want to process you through immigration. Her expression became guarded. My people, we do not use such things. We are recognized by our ships, our family marks. I have neither now. Marcus made a decision that would haunt him later. I'll list you as a refugee under my protection. It'll buy us time to figure out proper documentation. Station Alpha was a standard orbital platform, a kilometer-wide disk spinning to provide artificial gravity. Its docking bays could accommodate everything from single-seat fighters to massive bulk carriers. The Wandering Star was assigned Bay 7, a mid-sized berth in the commercial sector. The docking process went smoothly, with station traffic control showing no unusual interest in Marcus's passenger manifest. He helped Zara prepare for her first experience with artificial gravity, warning her that the transition could be disorienting for people used to zero-G environments. When the station's gravity field took hold, Zara stumbled slightly, but recovered with that same fluid grace Marcus had noticed before. If anything, she seemed more comfortable under acceleration than most spacers. Station Commander Elena Rodriguez met them at the airlock personally, which immediately set off warning bells in Marcus's mind. Cargo deliveries, even medical supplies, didn't usually warrant command attention. "Mr. Chun," Rodriguez said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome back to Alpha Station. I understand you have a passenger this trip." Rodriguez was a small, intense woman with the kind of energy that came from too much stimulants and too little sleep. Her uniform was crisp, but her eyes held the predatory gleam that Marcus associated with people who saw opportunity in others' misfortune. "Refugee pickup," Marcus replied carefully. "Found her drifting in a damaged ship. Standard humanitarian assistance." Rodriguez's gaze shifted to Zara, and Marcus saw something flicker in the commander's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or hunger. "Of course. We'll need to process her through our facility. Standard procedure." Zara moved closer to Marcus, and he caught a subtle scent from her skin. Not perfume, but something organic and complex that reminded him of ozone and flowering plants. "I would prefer to remain with Marcus Chun," she said in her musical voice, "until proper arrangements can be made." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Rodriguez said firmly. "Colonial regulations require all undocumented aliens to be processed through our security facility. For everyone's safety." The way she emphasized safety made Marcus's instincts scream warnings. Something was very wrong here. Station commanders didn't personally oversee refugee processing, and Rodriguez was showing far too much interest in one displaced alien. "How long will processing take?" Marcus asked. Rodriguez's smile became even more predatory. "That depends on many factors. Could be days, could be weeks. We're very thorough." Marcus felt Zara's hand brush against his arm, and when he looked at her, her silver eyes held an unmistakable message. "Trust me." "Actually," Zara said in her melodic voice, "there may be an alternative. I have contacts in this system who could vouch for me. If Marcus Chun would be willing to help me reach them." Rodriguez's expression darkened. "I'm afraid that's not an option. Security protocols are quite clear." But Marcus was already making plans. His cargo delivery wasn't scheduled for another 6 hours. If he could find some way to delay the processing, maybe get Zara off the station. "Commander," he said carefully, "my cargo includes priority medical supplies." The Colony Medical Center was very specific about delivery times. "If I could complete that first." Rodriguez studied him for a long moment, her predatory smile never wavering. "Of course, Mr. Chun. Business first. But I'll need to assign a security escort for your passenger." Standard procedure. 2 guards in colonial security uniforms stepped forward. They looked more like mercenaries than legitimate peacekeepers, with the kind of augmentations that were expensive and usually indicated combat experience. Marcus felt the situation spiraling beyond his control. Whatever game was being played here, he was clearly outmatched. But as he looked at Zara's calm expression, he realized that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the one doing the rescuing after all. "Very well," Zara said with serene dignity. "I will accompany your guards. But Marcus Chun has been most kind. Perhaps he could visit me during processing? I find human company comforting." Rodriguez's smile became genuine for the first time. "I'm sure that can be arranged. In fact, I insist on it." As the guards escorted Zara away, Marcus caught one last glimpse of her silver eyes. Instead of fear or resignation, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Anticipation. Marcus completed his cargo delivery in a daze, his mind racing as he tried to understand what he'd stumbled into. The medical supplies were received without incident, but he barely registered the paperwork or the automated loading procedures. His thoughts kept returning to Rodriguez's predatory smile and the recognition in her eyes when she'd looked at Zara. By the time he returned to his ship, Marcus had made a decision that would change everything. Whatever was happening here, whatever game Rodriguez was playing, Zara deserved better than to be a pawn in it. He'd found her drifting helpless in space, and he wasn't going to abandon her now. But as he began planning a rescue that he had no hope of executing successfully, Marcus never suspected that he was the one who needed saving. Marcus spent the next 4 hours in his ship's cramped quarters, staring at station schematics he'd downloaded from the public access terminals. Security Facility C7 was located in the station's lower levels, a maze of holding cells and processing centers that had been built during the early colonial period when pirate raids were more common. Getting inside would require bypassing multiple security checkpoints, and getting out with Zara would be nearly impossible. His planning was interrupted by an incoming communication request. The caller ID showed Commander Rodriguez, and Marcus felt his stomach knot as he accepted the connection. "Mr. Chun," Rodriguez's voice carried an oily satisfaction. "I thought you might like to know that your passenger is settling in well. She's been most cooperative during processing." Something in the way Rodriguez said cooperative made Marcus's skin crawl. "When will processing be complete?" "Oh, that's difficult to say. We've discovered some irregularities in her story. It seems the Kethmar have quite a reputation in certain circles. Very valuable, as she mentioned, but perhaps not in the way she led you to believe." Marcus kept his voice level despite the growing dread in his chest. "What kind of irregularities?" Rodriguez's laugh was sharp and predatory. "Let's just say that humanitarian rescue doesn't usually involve beings whose neural patterns are worth 50,000 credits to the right buyers. But don't worry, Mr. Chun. Your good deed won't go unrewarded. We'll make sure you receive a finder's fee." The connection ended before Marcus could respond, leaving him staring at the dark screen in horror. 50,000 credits. Neural patterns. The pieces clicked together in his mind with sickening clarity. Rodriguez wasn't running a legitimate security operation. She was trafficking in sentient beings, selling them to whatever monstrous buyers paid for living minds. Marcus's hands shook as he accessed his personal files and transferred his life savings to an anonymous credit stick. 18,000 credits. Not enough to buy Zara's freedom, but maybe enough to bribe a guard or purchase equipment for a rescue attempt. He'd figure out the details later. The station's commercial district never fully slept. Even at the current late hour, shops and entertainment venues catered to the rotating shifts of station personnel and visiting crews. Marcus made his way through the crowds, trying to blend in while his mind raced through increasingly desperate scenarios. He paused outside a security equipment store, studying the display of surveillance jammers and cutting tools. Most were civilian-grade, designed for miners and salvage operators, but some of the higher-end gear might serve his purpose. The problem was that purchasing such equipment would immediately flag him as suspicious to station security. "Rough night." Marcus spun to find a tall man in a cargo handler's jumpsuit studying him with amused eyes. The stranger was clearly human, but with the kind of augmentations that suggested military service. Cybernetic eyes that glowed faintly in the artificial lighting, and his left hand had been replaced with a precision manipulator arm. "I am sorry," Marcus said cautiously. The man gestured toward the security store. Window shopping for rescue gear at this hour usually means someone's in deep trouble. "I'm Jake Morrison, independent contractor." He extended his augmented hand. "And you look like someone who could use a friend." Marcus hesitated before accepting the handshake. Morrison's grip was firm but not crushing, and his cybernetic eyes seemed to be scanning Marcus's face for tells. "Marcus Chun, gotta go hold it." "I know," Morrison said with a slight smile. "Your ship's registration was flagged in the contractor database 6 hours ago, along with a very interesting bounty notice." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "Bounty?" Morrison's expression became serious. "Rodriguez put out a quiet contract on you and your passenger. 50,000 for the alien, 10,000 for you. Dead or alive, though alive is preferred for obvious reasons." The commercial district suddenly felt much more threatening. Marcus scanned the crowds, wondering how many of the apparent shoppers and workers might be bounty hunters studying him. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't like Rodriguez or her operation, Morrison said flatly. And because sometimes the right thing to do is also the profitable thing to do. Morrison led Marcus to a small cafe tucked between a ship repair facility and a weapons dealer. The lighting was dim, and the clientele looked like the kind of people who minded their own business. They found a corner booth where Morrison could watch the entrance. Rodriguez has been running a trafficking operation out of Station Alpha for 2 years, Morrison explained as they waited for their order. Colonial Command knows, but looks the other way because she keeps the official crime statistics low. Pirates, raiders, anyone who causes trouble in her territory just disappears. Marcus felt sick. And, you work for her? I work for whoever pays, Morrison said without apology. But I have standards. I don't traffic in sentience, and I don't hunt people for the crime of being inconvenient. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their drinks. Morrison had ordered something that glowed faintly blue, while Marcus stuck with synthetic coffee that tasted like burnt plastic, but contained enough stimulants to keep him alert. Your passenger, Morrison continued after the server left. The Kethmar. She's not what she seems. Marcus looked up sharply. What do you mean? Morrison's cybernetic eyes whirred softly as they focused on Marcus's face. I've seen her before. Different name, different ship, but the same face. Same story about being attacked by pirates and needing rescue. The cafe seemed to grow colder around them. Marcus set down his coffee with hands that had begun to tremble. You're saying she's a predator, Morrison finished. The Kethmar aren't traders or explorers. They're hunters, and they specialize in a very specific type of prey. Morrison reached into his jacket and produced a small data pad, activating a holographic display that showed surveillance footage from various stations across the sector. In each recording, Marcus could see Zara or beings very much like her, always rescued by lone cargo haulers or transport pilots. Always the same story of pirate attacks and damaged ships. What happens to the rescuers? Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. They disappear, Morrison said simply, usually within days of making port. Sometimes their ships are found drifting empty. Sometimes they're never found at all. Marcus stared at the surveillance footage, watching himself in the recordings of other men who had made the same choice he had. The same expression of noble determination, the same protective instincts being exploited by a predator who had perfected her hunting technique across decades or centuries. But why the elaborate setup? Marcus asked, if she's that dangerous, why involve Rodriguez at all? Morrison's expression became grim. Because Rodriguez provides something the Kethmar value more than individual prey. She provides a steady supply of humans who won't be missed. Cargo haulers, independent contractors, anyone who operates outside the formal shipping networks. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Zara hadn't been captured by Rodriguez's people. She'd been delivered to them. The whole rescue scenario had been theater designed to place him in exactly the position he now found himself in. Alone on a remote station, with no one to notice when he disappeared. How many? Marcus whispered. At least 30 confirmed disappearances over the past 2 years, Morrison replied. Could be twice that many. Rodriguez is very good at making people vanish from official records. Marcus pushed back from the table, his mind reeling. Every interaction with Zara took on a sinister new meaning. Her careful questions about his route and schedule. Her lack of curiosity about contacting her own people. The way she'd accepted being taken into custody without resistance. I have to warn someone, Marcus said, reaching for his communicator. Morrison's augmented hand clamped down on his wrist with mechanical precision. Warn who? Rodriguez controls station communications. Colonial Command is either complicit or compromised, and your passenger is currently in a secured facility surrounded by guards who shoot first and ask questions later. Then what do you suggest? Morrison's smile was sharp and predatory. We give them what they want. Over the next hour, Morrison outlined a plan that was simultaneously brilliant and terrifying. Instead of trying to rescue Zara, they would allow the trafficking operation to proceed as planned. But Morrison had contacts in the criminal underworld, buyers who were interested in acquiring a Kethmar for their own purposes. The beauty of it, Morrison explained, is that Rodriguez thinks she's selling to her usual buyers. But we intercept the transfer and turn the tables. Your passenger becomes our prisoner instead of our predator. Marcus struggled with the moral implications. Even if Zara was a predator who had killed dozens of innocent people, the idea of selling a sentient being felt fundamentally wrong. But the alternative was allowing her to continue hunting, with himself as the next victim. What guarantee do I have that your buyers are any better than Rodriguez's? Marcus asked. Morrison's cybernetic eyes glowed brighter in the dim lighting. Because I'm not selling her to buyers. I'm selling her to myself. And what I plan to do with a captured Kethmar is extract information about their hunting grounds and methods. Information that could save hundreds of lives. The plan required Marcus to play his part perfectly. He would return to his ship and wait for Rodriguez to contact him about the finder's fee she'd promised. When the time came for the transfer, Morrison's people would be in position to intercept. What about after? Marcus asked. Once Rodriguez realizes what happened, Rodriguez will be dead, Morrison said matter-of-factly, along with anyone else involved in the trafficking operation. I've been building a case against them for months, waiting for the right opportunity. Marcus left the cafe with his head spinning. Everything he thought he knew about the situation had been turned upside down. The woman he'd rescued was a predator. The station commander was a trafficker. And his only ally was a killer who spoke casually about eliminating anyone who stood in his way. Back in his ship, Marcus tried to process the implications of what he'd learned. The Kethmar were hunters, not victims. But how many species in the galaxy appeared harmless while concealing predatory natures? How many of humanity's first contact scenarios had been carefully orchestrated hunting scenarios? His brooding was interrupted by an incoming message from Rodriguez. Mr. Chun, I'm pleased to inform you that processing is almost complete. Please report to Docking Bay 12 at 0800 station time for your finder's fee and final cargo inspection. Docking Bay 12 was in the industrial section, far from the commercial traffic. Perfect for a clandestine transfer. Marcus acknowledged the message and began preparing for what might be his last performance as an innocent cargo hauler. But as he checked his ship's systems one final time, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. His cargo hold's atmospheric sensors were showing readings that didn't match the current environmental settings. Someone had been in his ship while he was meeting with Morrison. Marcus drew his sidearm and made his way carefully toward the cargo hold. The medical supplies he'd delivered were gone, but that wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the faint, ozone-like scent that lingered in the recycled air. The same scent he'd noticed from Zara's skin. In the far corner of the hold, partially hidden behind a support strut, Marcus found what he was looking for. A small device about the size of his thumb, pulsing with soft bioluminescence. He'd never seen anything like it, but its purpose was clear. It was a tracking beacon. Marcus stared at the device for several minutes, his mind racing through the implications. If Zara had planted it before being taken into custody, that meant she'd been planning ahead. But planning for what? And how had she known he would be in a position to help her? The answer came to him with sickening clarity. Morrison was wrong about one crucial detail. The Kethmar weren't just hunters. They were pack hunters. And Zara hadn't been captured at all. She was bait. Outside his ship, Marcus could hear the normal sounds of station operations continuing. Cargo loaders moving freight, maintenance crews performing routine repairs, passengers moving between shuttles, and the main terminal. All of it proceeding normally while a trap that had been months in the making finally closed around him. Marcus activated his ship's emergency protocols and began a full diagnostic of all systems. If he was going to survive the next few hours, he needed to know exactly what he was dealing with. But as the scans completed, his worst fears were confirmed. His ship had been thoroughly compromised. Navigation systems, communications, life support, even the self-destruct mechanism. Everything had been subtly altered in ways that would give an outside party complete control over his vessel. The Kethmar hadn't just been hunting him. They'd been studying him, learning his routines and capabilities. The damaged ship he'd found hadn't been a random encounter. It had been precisely positioned along his regular route, timed to catch him during the most vulnerable part of his journey. But if Morrison was right about the trafficking operation, then Rodriguez was also being played. The station commander thought she was running a profitable side business, but she was actually providing cover for something much more sophisticated. Marcus realized with growing horror that he wasn't just facing a single predator or a corrupt station commander. He was caught between two apex predators who had been using each other without fully understanding the game they were playing. And somewhere in the middle of it all, 30 human lives have been lost as collateral damage in a hunt that spanned multiple star systems and involved resources beyond anything a primitive species like humanity could hope to match. Marcus checked his chronometer. 3 hours until the scheduled transfer. 3 hours to figure out how to survive a trap that had been designed by beings who had been perfecting their hunting techniques for millennia. But as he began planning his next moves, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood. The thrill of being truly challenged. For the first time in his life, he was facing an opponent worthy of his full attention and capabilities. He began to smile. Marcus spent the next hour methodically documenting every modification that had been made to his ship. The alterations were elegant and sophisticated, designed to remain undetected during routine maintenance, while giving an external operator complete control when activated. Whoever had done this work possessed a deep understanding of human engineering principles. But they had made one critical error. They had underestimated human paranoia. Marcus had installed his own modifications over the years, hidden safeguards, and backup systems that weren't in any manual or maintenance record. His father had been a military engineer during the colonial wars, and he taught his son that the most dangerous enemy was the one who knew exactly what you were capable of. Working quickly, Marcus began activating systems that officially didn't exist. Emergency communication arrays hidden in the ship's structural framework. Independent life support circuits that could maintain him for days if the primary systems failed. And, most importantly, a secondary navigation computer that operated independently of the ship's main network. As he worked, Marcus found himself thinking about Morrison's warnings and Zara's true nature. The evidence was compelling, but something didn't feel right. If the Kethmar were such sophisticated hunters, why had they left such an obvious tracking device in his cargo hold? And why had Zara allowed herself to be taken into custody when she could have simply disappeared into the station's population? The answer came to him as he finished installing a new communication relay. She hadn't made a mistake. She wanted him to find the tracking device, just as she'd wanted him to meet Morrison and learn about the trafficking operation. Everything that had happened since he'd rescued her was part of a larger design. But whose design? Marcus activated his hidden communication array and began scanning for unusual transmissions. The normal chatter of station operations filled the frequencies, but underneath the routine traffic, he detected something interesting. A series of high-frequency bursts that seemed to be emanating from Security Facility C7. The transmissions were encrypted, but Marcus had access to military-grade decryption software that his father had installed years ago. It took several minutes to break the code, and when he did, what he found made his blood run cold. The transmissions weren't coming from Zara. They were coming from Morrison. Marcus stared at the decoded messages in growing horror. Morrison wasn't an independent contractor trying to expose a trafficking ring. He was coordinating it. The entire operation was his, with Rodriguez serving as his local representative. And the messages he was sending were instructions for preparing multiple packages for simultaneous transfer. Multiple packages. Marcus wasn't the only one being hunted. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The surveillance footage Morrison had shown him wasn't evidence of Kethmar hunting patterns. It was documentation of Morrison's own activities. The disappeared cargo haulers hadn't been victims of alien predators. They'd been harvested by human traffickers. But if Morrison was running the operation, then what was Zara's role? And why had she seemed so familiar with the process when Rodriguez's people took her into custody? Marcus began cross-referencing the transmission timestamps with his own activities since arriving at the station. The pattern that emerged was terrifying in its precision. Every move he'd made had been anticipated and prepared for. His meeting with Morrison hadn't been a chance encounter. It had been a carefully orchestrated manipulation designed to place him exactly where Morrison needed him to be. The tracking device in his cargo hold suddenly made perfect sense. It wasn't Kethmar technology at all. It was human, designed to look alien to reinforce the false narrative about extraterrestrial hunters. Morrison had planted it during one of his ship's routine maintenance cycles, probably months ago. Marcus felt a growing rage building in his chest. 30 human beings had died, not because of alien predators, but because of human greed. Morrison had been selling his own species to whatever buyers paid the highest prices, using the cover story of alien hunters to deflect any investigation. But there was still the question of Zara. If she wasn't a Kethmar hunter, then what was she? And why had Morrison been so eager to convince Marcus that she was dangerous? The answer came from an unexpected source. As Marcus continued monitoring the encrypted transmissions, he detected a new signal. This one was different, originating from somewhere deep within the station structure. The encryption was unlike anything in his database, based on mathematical principles that seemed almost organic in their complexity. When he finally managed to decode a fragment of the transmission, Marcus found himself reading something that changed everything he thought he understood about the situation. Target confirmed. Human trafficking operation identified. Préparer une intervention protocole. Estimated casualties. Minimal if subjects cooperate. The transmission was signed with a designation that made Marcus's hands shake. Kethmar Enforcement Division. Zara wasn't a hunter. She was law enforcement. The implications crashed over Marcus like a tidal wave. The Kethmar weren't predators stalking human prey. They were investigators tracking down a human criminal organization that had been kidnapping and selling people across multiple star systems. Zara's rescue scenario hadn't been designed to hunt him. It had been designed to infiltrate the trafficking network. And Marcus had been an unknowing accomplice in her undercover operation. He pulled up the surveillance footage Morrison had shown him, studying it with new eyes. The Kethmar in the recordings weren't hunting the human pilots. They were documenting the crimes being committed against them. Each disappeared cargo hauler had probably been rescued and relocated after providing testimony about Morrison's operation. But if that was true, then why had Morrison felt comfortable showing the footage to Marcus? Either he was incredibly arrogant, or Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Morrison knew about Zara's true identity. The entire confrontation at the cafe had been theater designed to test Marcus's reactions and determine how much he knew. Morrison had been evaluating him as either a potential accomplice or a potential threat. And based on Marcus's responses, Morrison had apparently decided he was a threat. A new encrypted transmission appeared on Marcus's screen, this one using Morrison's personal encryption codes. As Marcus decoded it, he realized he was reading his own death warrant. Subject Chun has become problematic. Recommend immediate termination during transfer operation. Make it look like he resisted during alien capture attempt. Disposal priority, maximum. Marcus checked his chronometer. 2 hours until the scheduled transfer. Morrison was planning to kill him and make it look like he'd been murdered by alien hunters. The perfect ending to a cover story that had been protecting a human trafficking operation for years. But Marcus was no longer the naive cargo hauler who had answered a distress call in deep space. The revelations of the past few hours had awakened something in him that he'd never known existed. A cold, calculating fury that demanded justice for the 30 humans who had died to protect Morrison's crimes. Marcus began implementing a plan that would have made his military engineer father proud. If Morrison wanted to stage an elaborate deception, Marcus would give him one. But the surprise ending would be decidedly different from what the trafficker expected. First, Marcus activated a hidden subroutine in his ship's computer that would begin broadcasting a detailed record of everything he discovered. The transmission would be sent to Colonial Command, the Merchant Marine Authority, and every news outlet in the sector. If something happened to him, the truth about Morrison's operation would become public knowledge within hours. Next, he used his independent navigation system to plot multiple escape routes from the station. His ship might be compromised, but his secret modifications gave him capabilities that Morrison wouldn't expect. If things went wrong during the transfer, Marcus would be ready. Finally, Marcus prepared a surprise that he hoped would give Zara the opportunity she needed to complete her mission. The tracking device Morrison had planted wasn't just a beacon. It was also a sophisticated monitoring system that could record conversations and transmit data if Marcus could turn it into a weapon. Working with equipment he'd acquired during his years as a cargo hauler, Marcus began modifying the tracking device. Instead of sending location data to Morrison's receivers, it would now broadcast everything it recorded on emergency frequencies that were monitored by colonial authorities. When Morrison activated the device during the transfer operation, he would unknowingly confess his crimes to every law enforcement agency in the sector. But Marcus's most important preparation was psychological. For 30 years, he'd been a peaceful cargo hauler who avoided conflict and minded his own business. That version of himself would have been helpless against Morrison's sophisticated operation. The man who would walk into docking bay 12 in 2 hours would be something entirely different. Marcus Chun, the cargo hauler, was about to die. What emerged from his ship would be the son of a military engineer, with all the skills and instincts that heritage implied. Marcus spent the remaining time reviewing his father's old tactical manuals and preparing equipment that he'd hoped never to use. Weapons that were supposedly civilian mining tools but could serve other purposes. Communication gear that could operate outside normal frequencies. And, most importantly, the mental conditioning his father had taught him for surviving in hostile environments. The enemy always has advantages you don't, his father had said during their training sessions. Superior numbers, better equipment, knowledge of the terrain. Your only advantage is that they don't know what you're truly capable of until it's too late to matter. As the appointed time approached, Marcus made final preparations. He recorded a message for his sister on Earth, explaining what had happened and why he'd made the choices he had. He updated his will and testament, leaving his ship and remaining assets to the families of trafficking victims. And he armed himself with the kind of weapons that would have surprised anyone who knew him as a simple cargo hauler. Marcus made his way through the station toward Docking Bay 12, moving with the casual confidence of someone who had no idea what awaited him. But his enhanced senses were cataloging every detail of his environment. Emergency exits, security camera locations, the positioning of Morrison's people throughout the commercial district. They thought they were herding an oblivious victim toward slaughter. What they were actually doing was walking into a trap that had been set by someone who understood exactly how predators thought. Docking Bay 12 was located in the oldest section of Station Alpha, where the artificial gravity was less stable and the lighting cast deep shadows between maintenance conduits. Perfect territory for an ambush, which was undoubtedly why Morrison had chosen it. As Marcus approached the entrance, he could see figures moving in the shadows. Morrison's people taking positions for the kill. They would wait until he was isolated inside the bay, away from witnesses, before making their move. But Marcus had spent the past hours studying the bay schematics and identifying every possible advantage. He knew exactly where each of Morrison's people would position themselves. More importantly, he knew where they wouldn't expect him to be when the shooting started. Marcus paused at the entrance to Docking Bay 12, taking what appeared to be a casual look around. To any observer, he was simply a nervous cargo hauler checking for trouble. In reality, he was confirming his tactical assessment and making final adjustments to his plan. Everything was in position. Morrison's people were where Marcus expected them to be. The modified tracking device was ready to broadcast their confessions across the sector. And Somewhere in Security Facility C7, Zara was probably making her own preparations for what was about to unfold. Marcus smiled and walked into the bay, whistling softly to himself. Behind him, Morrison's killers moved into position, confident that they were about to eliminate another witness to their crimes. They had no idea that they had just walked into the most dangerous trap any of them would ever encounter. Because Marcus Chun, the cargo hauler, was indeed about to die in Docking Bay 12. But what would emerge from that death would be something that Morrison and his organization were completely unprepared to face. Docking Bay 12 was a cavernous space designed to accommodate the largest cargo vessels that frequented Station Alpha. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows between support pillars and maintenance equipment, creating the perfect environment for the ambush Morrison had planned. Marcus counted at least 6 figures positioned around the bay's perimeter as he walked toward the center where a shuttle waited with running lights active. Commander Rodriguez emerged from behind the shuttle, her predatory smile even more pronounced in the dim lighting. "Mr. Chun, thank you for being so punctual. I trust you're ready to conclude our business arrangement?" Marcus nodded, playing his part as the oblivious cargo hauler. "I have to admit, I'm curious about this finder's fee you mentioned. 50,000 credits seems generous for a simple rescue." "Oh, you've earned every credit," Rodriguez said, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Your passenger has proven to be quite valuable indeed." The buyers are very pleased. Behind Rodriguez, the shuttle's cargo ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss. 2 guards emerged, carrying a containment unit that hummed with barely contained energy. Through the transparent aluminum viewing port, Marcus could see Zara's unconscious form suspended in some kind of stasis field. "Impressive technology," Marcus commented, studying the containment unit with apparent fascination. "I've never seen anything like it." Rodriguez's smile widened. "The buyers provided it specially for this transfer. Apparently, the Kethmar have certain defensive capabilities that require special handling." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, but his enhanced senses were cataloging every detail of the scene. The containment unit wasn't human technology at all. It was clearly alien in design, with organic curves and bioluminescent control surfaces that pulsed in complex patterns. More importantly, the stasis field wasn't suppressing Zara's capabilities. It was amplifying them. Morrison stepped out of the shadows near the bay's main entrance, his cybernetic augmentations gleaming in the emergency lighting. "I have to say, Mr. Chun, you've exceeded all expectations. Not many civilians would risk their lives for a complete stranger." "It seemed like the right thing to do," Marcus replied, maintaining his facade of innocent nobility. "Though I have to ask, what exactly do the buyers plan to do with her?" Morrison exchanged a glance with Rodriguez before answering. "Let's just say that Kethmar neural patterns are extremely valuable to certain research organizations. They're studying consciousness transfer, memory extraction, that sort of thing." The casual way Morrison discussed what amounted to torture and murder made Marcus's blood boil, but he kept his expression neutral. Instead, he activated the modified tracking device using a concealed control in his jacket pocket. Immediately, the device began broadcasting everything it recorded on emergency frequencies. "Research," Marcus said thoughtfully. "That explains the sophisticated containment technology. Though I have to wonder, how many others have you processed through this facility?" Rodriguez's smile faltered slightly. "Others? Come now, Commander. An operation this sophisticated doesn't develop overnight. How many cargo haulers have made lucky rescues in this sector over the past few years?" Morrison's cybernetic eyes narrowed as he studied Marcus with new attention. "You seem remarkably well-informed for a simple cargo hauler, Mr. Chun." Marcus shrugged. "I've been flying these routes for 8 years. You notice patterns when people disappear without explanation." The tension in the docking bay ratcheted up several notches as Morrison's people began moving closer. Marcus counted 8 armed figures now visible around the bay's perimeter, all carrying weapons that were definitely not standard security equipment. "Patterns," Morrison repeated slowly. "Yes, I imagine you would notice those. Tell me, Mr. Chun, what other patterns have you observed?" Instead of answering directly, Marcus reached into his jacket and produced a small data pad. I've been keeping records, actually, 37 disappearances over the past 2 years, all following similar circumstances. Lone cargo haulers, damaged alien ships, mysterious rescues that end with the pilots vanishing without explanation. Rodriguez and Morrison exchanged another glance, this one laden with menace. Around the bay, their people were taking positions for what was clearly about to become a firefight. That's quite a detailed investigation, Morrison said carefully. Almost as if you knew what you were looking for before you started looking. Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the bay, and something in his expression made several of the armed figures hesitate. You're absolutely right, Morrison. I didn't know what I was looking for. Because unlike you, I actually read the intelligence briefings that come through legitimate cargo hauler channels. The data pad in Marcus's hand projected a holographic display that filled the center of the docking bay. Colonial Intelligence Service emblems rotated slowly above documentation that detailed Morrison's entire operation. Jake Morrison, Marcus continued, his voice carrying an authority that hadn't been there before. Former Colonial Marine, dishonorably discharged for trafficking in alien artifacts. Currently wanted by Colonial Intelligence for operating an illegal sentient trafficking ring across 7-star systems. Morrison's augmented hand moved toward his weapon, but Marcus was already in motion. The harmless cargo hauler facade dropped away like a discarded costume, revealing someone who moved with the fluid precision of advanced military training. Marcus's first shot took out the nearest armed figure before anyone else could react. His second disabled the shuttle's engines, preventing any possibility of escape. By the time Morrison's people realized they were dealing with an entirely different kind of opponent, Marcus had taken cover behind a cargo container and was systematically eliminating their advantage in numbers. "Kill him," Rodriguez screamed, drawing her own weapon. But her voice cracked with the kind of panic that came from watching a carefully laid plan disintegrate in seconds. The firefight that followed was brief, but devastating. Marcus's hidden modifications to his equipment included weapons that were far more sophisticated than anything Morrison's people carried. More importantly, his tactical training allowed him to use the bay's layout to his advantage. Within minutes, half of Morrison's team was down, and the others were pinned behind inadequate cover. Morrison himself was wounded and bleeding from a shot that had shattered his cybernetic arm. "You're military," Morrison gasped as Marcus advanced on his position. "Intelligence service. This whole thing was a setup." Marcus smiled grimly. "Not quite. I really am a cargo hauler, Morrison. But my father was Colonel James Chun of the Colonial Engineering Corps, and he made sure his son could handle himself if things ever went wrong." "Your father?" Morrison's cybernetic eyes widened as recognition dawned. "The Battle of Kepler Prime. He designed the defensive systems that held off the Raider fleets. Among other things, Marcus confirmed. He also taught me that the most dangerous predators are the ones who prey on their own species." Marcus's next shot disabled Morrison's remaining weapons, leaving the trafficker defenseless, but alive. Around the bay, the surviving members of Morrison's team had thrown down their weapons and surrendered. "Rodriguez," Marcus called out. "Your turn." The station commander emerged from behind the shuttle with her hands raised, her predatory smile replaced by naked terror. "You don't understand," she babbled. "The buyers, they'll kill us all if we don't deliver. They're not human, Chun. There's something else, something worse." Marcus was about to respond when the containment unit behind Rodriguez began to glow with increasing intensity. The stasis field that had been holding Zara flickered and died, and her silver eyes opened for the first time since the confrontation began. "Actually," Zara said in her melodic voice as she stepped out of the containment unit, "we're something better." The transformation that followed was subtle but profound. Zara's delicate features remained the same, but her presence filled the docking bay with an authority that made everyone present step back involuntarily. Her silver eyes now held depths that suggested intelligence far beyond what any human had imagined possible. Jake Morrison, she said, and her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate through the bay's metal structure. You stand accused of trafficking in sentient beings across multiple star systems. The evidence against you has been collected and verified by Kethmar investigative protocols. Morrison tried to speak, but found himself unable to make a sound. Around the bay, his surviving people were experiencing the same phenomenon. Only Marcus and Rodriguez seemed unaffected by whatever Zara was doing. Commander Rodriguez, Zara continued, your cooperation with this investigation has been noted. However, your voluntary participation in crimes against sentience cannot be overlooked. Rodriguez fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Please, she whispered. I didn't know. I thought they were just smugglers, criminals. I never knew they were selling people, to us, Zara finished gently. Yes, Commander. Jake Morrison has been selling human beings to Kethmar research facilities. Not for consciousness transfer or memory extraction, but for protection and relocation after they provided testimony about his crimes. The implications of what Zara was saying hit Marcus like a physical blow. The disappeared cargo haulers hadn't been killed. They'd been rescued and given new lives under Kethmar protection after helping to build a case against Morrison's organization. But the neural patterns, Marcus said, Morrison said they were worth 50,000 credits. Zara's expression became sad. The recorded experiences of trafficking victims, memories of what was done to them, testimony that could be presented in any court in the galaxy. Worth 50,000 credits, not to buyers, but as evidence that will convict Morrison and his associates. Rodriguez was sobbing openly now. I thought the briefings said you were predators, that humans needed protection from alien infiltration. Morrison's briefings, Zara corrected, designed to make his human accomplices believe they were protecting their species rather than betraying it. A very human form of psychological manipulation. Marcus looked around the docking bay, seeing the scene with completely new understanding. Morrison's operation hadn't been selling humans to alien predators. It had been selling them to alien law enforcement as protected witnesses. The Kethmar weren't hunters stalking human prey. They were the galaxy's police force, and Morrison had been helping them build airtight cases against human trafficking organizations. But why the elaborate deception? Marcus asked, why didn't you just identify yourself when I rescued you? Zara's silver eyes focused on him with an expression that might have been gratitude. Because we needed to understand the full scope of Morrison's operation. And because we needed to evaluate you, Marcus Chun. Evaluate me for what? Zara stepped closer, and Marcus caught that same complex scent he'd noticed before. Not perfume, but something that spoke of vast distances and alien spaces. Your species is at a crossroads, Marcus. Humanity is expanding into the galaxy faster than any species in recorded history. You're encountering dozens of new civilizations every year. She gestured toward Morrison and his accomplices. Some of your people respond to that contact with fear and greed. They see other species as threats to be eliminated or resources to be exploited. Her gaze returned to Marcus. But others, like you, respond with curiosity and compassion. You risked your life to save someone you'd never met, from a species you'd never encountered. That kind of response is rare. Marcus felt a chill of premonition. You're recruiting. The Kethmar serve as peacekeepers and investigators throughout this spiral arm of the galaxy, Zara confirmed. But we cannot be everywhere, and we cannot understand every species we encounter. We need partners who share our values and our commitment to justice. She extended her hand toward Marcus. We need humans who can think beyond the boundaries of their own species. People who can see the galaxy not as a collection of potential enemies or resources, but as a community that requires protection and nurturing. Marcus stared at her outstretched hand, understanding that his answer would determine the course of the rest of his life. Behind Zara, the containment unit had transformed into some kind of communication device, displaying star maps that showed the locations of dozens of ongoing investigations across the galaxy. "The 30 people who disappeared," Marcus said. "Where are they now?" "Living new lives under Kethmar protection," Zara replied. "Some have chosen to return to human space with new identities. Others have joined our organization. All of them are safe, and all of them helped bring criminals like Morrison to justice." Marcus looked around the docking bay one final time. Morrison and his people would face justice for their crimes. Rodriguez would probably spend the rest of her life in a colonial prison. And somewhere in the galaxy, 30 human beings were alive because they'd been brave enough to testify against the people who had enslaved them. "What happens if I say no?" Marcus asked. Zara's smile was gentle and understanding. "You return to your cargo runs. We provide you with a new ship to replace the one Morrison compromised, and you continue living the life you've built. No pressure, no coercion. The choice must be freely made." Marcus thought about his quiet life, hauling cargo between the same dozen systems. Routine deliveries, predictable schedules, the comfortable isolation of deep space. It was a good life, but it was also a limited one. He thought about his father's stories of the colonial wars, when humanity had been united in the face of external threats. How that unity had fractured as the threats faded, and people forgot what they were capable of when they worked together. He thought about the 30 cargo haulers who had made the same choice he'd made, answering distress calls from strangers in the dark. All of them had been willing to risk their lives for people they'd never met. All of them had chosen compassion over safety. Marcus took Zara's hand. "When do we start?" The smile that spread across Zara's features was radiant with joy and relief. Around them, the docking bay began to fill with figures in Kethmar enforcement uniforms as backup teams arrived to secure the crime scene. But Marcus only had eyes for the woman who had shown him that saving someone sometimes meant being willing to be saved in return. "We start," Zara said, "by learning to see the galaxy through each other's eyes. The universe is vast and full of wonders, Marcus Chun. But it's also full of people like Morrison who see only opportunities for profit and exploitation." She gestured toward the star maps still displayed above the communication device. Every point of light represents a world where someone needs help. A species facing extinction, a civilization torn apart by war, a group of refugees fleeing persecution. The Kethmar have been trying to help all of them, but we're only one species among thousands. Marcus studied the star maps with growing understanding. You're building a coalition, not just human partners, but representatives from every species willing to work for justice. Exactly. A galaxy-wide organization dedicated to protecting those who cannot protect themselves. It won't be easy, and it won't be safe. There are forces in the universe that profit from chaos and suffering, and they won't give up without a fight. Marcus thought about Morrison and the casual way he discussed selling sentient beings to the highest bidder. How many other humans were involved in similar operations? How many alien species saw humanity as nothing more than a source of exploitable resources? "The choice I'm making," Marcus said slowly, "it's not just about joining your organization, is it? It's about what kind of species humanity becomes as we expand into the galaxy." Zara's silver eyes reflected depths of understanding that spoke of civilizations rising and falling across millions of years. Every species faces this choice, Marcus. Some, like the Kethmar, choose cooperation and mutual aid. Others choose conquest and exploitation. Most choose something in between, trading with allies while destroying enemies. She squeezed his hand gently. Humanity is young and still deciding which path to follow. People like you will determine whether your species becomes a force for justice in the galaxy or another predator that sees other civilizations as prey. Marcus looked around the docking bay one final time. Morrison and his people were being loaded into Kethmar detention units that would transport them to a court system that spanned multiple star systems. Rodriguez was being treated for shock by medical technicians whose techniques combined the best of dozens of different species healing arts. All of it was possible because someone had been willing to risk their life to save a stranger in distress. Not just Marcus, but every cargo hauler who had answered a distress call for people they'd never met. Human compassion had made this moment possible. "I understand," Marcus said, "and I accept." The consequences of that acceptance would reshape not just Marcus's life, but humanity's place in a galaxy full of wonders and terrors. He would learn to navigate the complex politics of a coalition that included species whose thought processes bore no resemblance to anything human. He would face dangers that would make Morrison's trafficking operation look like a minor criminal enterprise. But he would also discover capabilities within himself that he'd never imagined possible. The son of a military engineer who had spent 30 years hauling cargo would become something unprecedented. A human representative in an organization dedicated to protecting the innocent across hundreds of star systems. And, perhaps most importantly, he would help ensure that when humanity finally took its place among the great civilizations of the galaxy, it would be remembered not as conquerors or exploiters, but as the species that had chosen to save others even when it meant risking everything they had. Marcus Chun, the cargo hauler, was dead. What emerged from Docking Bay 12 was something the galaxy had never seen before, a human being who understood that saving someone sometimes meant being willing to be saved in return. The universe would never be the same.